The cabin wasn't loud until she made it so. "Get your ass out!" The flight attendant's voice sliced through the rows like a siren that nobody had called for. Her finger was a dagger, leveled straight at the man in the aisle. An older gentleman in a plain navy polo, khaki trousers, skin lined with age but posture steady as an oak, his brow furrowed, not in fear, but in disbelief. "Huh?" he said softly, the word almost lost beneath the weight of her rage. Passengers froze. One woman clutched her purse tighter. A man 2 rows back lifted his phone, recording in silence. Some mouths hung open, others closed fast, as if holding back complicity. "You don't belong in first class," she barked, each syllable heavy with venom. "Not dressed like that. Not looking like that. Move before security moves you." For a moment, no one breathed. The overhead lights hummed like tension itself, illuminating faces that could no longer pretend this wasn't happening. The old man didn't raise his voice, didn't shift his stance. He stood still in the aisle, ticket still in his hand, quiet dignity pressed against open hostility. Behind her, another attendant muttered under her breath, but loud enough for row 5 to hear. "Seen this scam before, cheap printout, he's lying." A chuckle slipped from her lips, brittle and cruel. The man blinked slowly, as if measuring the insult, weighing it against decades of memory. He had heard it before in banks, in hotels, in offices where the color of his skin was mistaken for the limit of his worth. And now, here it was again, 30,000 feet in the air. Gasps rippled down the cabin. A teenage boy whispered to his mother, "But his ticket scanned green. I saw it at the gate." She hushed him, but her eyes stayed fixed on the scene unfolding like a trial without a judge. Phones tilted higher. Screens glowed. A collective silence filled the plane, one heavy enough to crush even the recycled air. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Marcus. The attendant's face was flushed now. Anger painted crimson across her cheeks. Her voice rose again, lewder, certain. "Get him out before this plane leaves the ground." Marcus didn't flinch. He had built empires on patience. He had stared down investors, competitors, and storms fiercer than this. And yet, what stung wasn't her words, it was how familiar they felt. Because once again, in the cabin of an airline he helped build, he was told he didn't belong. The plane wasn't full yet, but first class already carried its quiet theater of glances and whispers. Leather seats gleamed under muted lights. Champagne flutes waited in silver holders like trophies no one had yet earned. Everything about the cabin was staged to project exclusivity until one man unsettled the script simply by existing in it. Marcus Jordan, 68, moved with a measured calm. His shirt was simple, his shoes unbranded, his hands empty except for a boarding pass folded once across the seam. Nothing about him suggested power. That was intentional. Because Marcus didn't step on this plane as a CEO. He stepped on it as a passenger, one who had chosen, deliberately, to travel alone, without entourage, without status symbols. To the crew, he looked like a man out of place. To the passengers, he was another stranger with tired eyes. What no one realized was that Marcus wasn't here for luxury. He was here for clarity. 25 years earlier, Marcus had been denied an interview at a regional airline with the words, "Not the image we're looking for." He carried those words into every deal, every acquisition, every boardroom. Now, he owned a controlling stake in the very airline flying him west. But ownership on paper didn't erase prejudice in practice. And tonight, prejudice had walked right up the aisle, dressed in a pressed uniform, speaking through a raised voice. The tension spread seat by seat like turbulence without warning. A woman in 3C leaned forward, whispering, "He looks lost." Her husband shook his head, or lying. 2 rows back, a young man frowned, remembering the green scan at the gate, certain of what he saw. And in the corner, a flight trainee barely older than 20 raised her phone, not to film, but to record audio, her small act of conscience tucked inside a trembling pocket. Marcus remained still. He did not correct them. He did not protest. Silence was his shield, and dignity his weapon. Every second he held it, the cabin grew more divided between those who doubted him and those who doubted the crew. The attendant closest to him crossed her arms, lips curled with disdain. "This isn't a shelter," she sneered. "First class is for real clients, not walk-ins who print tickets at home." Her words didn't just accuse. They erased. Marcus exhaled slowly, as though he were counting each insult. setting it on a shelf in his mind where they would stay until the moment he chose to use them. And that moment was not yet, because Marcus Jordan knew something they didn't. He had the patience of decades, the silence of strategy, and the authority of ownership. And while the cabin thought it was witnessing a man being humiliated, it was, in truth, witnessing the beginning of a test the airline staff were already failing, word by word, action by action. The tension should have settled. It didn't. Instead, it thickened like fog rolling in through a sealed cabin. Another attendant approached, younger, smirking as though the scene were entertainment. He glanced at Marcus, then at the empty seat in 2 amperes, and let out a laugh meant for the entire row to hear. "Sir, you sure this is where you belong? Economy's back there. Lot more your speed." The words landed like sparks on dry cloth. A couple near the window chuckled softly, trying to mask it with coughs. But for others, the sound scraped nerves raw. Marcus didn't move. He kept the boarding pass pinched between 2 fingers, its torn edge from handling already curling like a quiet reminder. This seat was his, and he wasn't leaving it. The attendant leaned closer, lowering his voice, but not enough to be private. "Look, man, we've seen your type. Flashy lies, fake cards, made-up bookings. Don't make us call security." His breath carried the smell of coffee and arrogance. The threat carried the weight of bias disguised as procedure. "Amurmur swelled." Row 3, silent until now, shifted uncomfortably. One woman whispered, "This feels wrong." A man in a business suit beside her shook his head. "Policy is policy. Crew knows best." From the back of first class, a teenage boy couldn't hold his tongue. His ticket scanned green. "I saw it," he shouted, voice cracking with both fear and defiance. Heads turned. The mother yanked at his sleeve, but the words were already loose, floating above the rows like truth nobody wanted to claim. The senior attendant, sharp blazer pressed to perfection, finally entered the fray. Her heels clicked against the aisle, each step precise, rehearsed, like a verdict already written. She stopped inches from Marcus. "You have 2 options. Move voluntarily or be escorted off this plane in front of everyone. Decide now." The cabin fell still. Even the hum of the engines waiting at idle seemed quieter. Marcus looked up at her slowly, his expression unreadable. No plea. No panits. Just stillness. Behind him, a young trainee in uniform gripped the hem of her jacket, jaw tight. She had seen the boarding pass scan. She had logged it green herself. Her lips parted, ready to speak, then closed again under the weight of hierarchy. A couple of phones lifted higher. Screens recorded angles, faces, silence that spoke louder than shouts. Passengers leaned in, some hungry for spectacle, others uneasy at injustice creeping into the luxury they'd paid for. And Marcus sat there, anchored. He let the threats hang in the air like turbulence no seatbelt could tame, because he knew the storm was just beginning. And storms, if you wait long enough, reveal who can really fly. The weight of every eye pressed down on him, but Marcus did not yield. He didn't flinch, didn't argue, didn't even raise his hands in protest. Instead, he adjusted his grip on the boarding pass creased now, soft at the edges from handling, and placed it carefully on the armrest beside him. That simple act said more than any speech could. "I'm not moving. This is mine." The attendants mistook his silence for weakness. The passengers mistook it for shame. But silence can be many things. Fear, yes, but also power. And Marcus had learned long ago which kind of silence carried further. The senior attendant leaned down, her perfume sharp as her tone. "Sir, ignoring me won't save you. You are not supposed to be here." Her words snapped like brittle glass, but Marcus stayed still, gaze steady, eyes dark with something she couldn't quite read. Behind her, the younger attendant chuckled. "Maybe he doesn't understand English," he muttered not softly enough. A ripple of awkward laughter slid through 2 rows, more from discomfort than humor. Others winced, their lips pressed thin, caught between complicity and conscience. The teenage boy from earlier whispered again, "He gets it. He just ain't moving." His mother pulled him back down into the seat, but her eyes betrayed doubt in the crew. A woman in 4B adjusted her scarf, then said quietly but clearly, "He hasn't raised his voice once." Her seatmate frowned. "That's not the point. He doesn't belong here." But the statement cracked, flimsy now under the calm sitting just 2 seats ahead. Marcus exhaled, the sound low, steady, grounding. In his mind, he wasn't on this plane. He was 28 again, sitting in a bank lobby in Atlanta, told he couldn't withdraw his own funds until he proved where they came from. He was 35, standing in a hotel lobby, waiting for a reservation to be verified, while others walked past him unchecked. The faces changed. The uniforms changed. The prejudice did not. That memory settled in his chest, not as anger but as clarity. He'd seen this script before, and he knew how it ended. A passenger 2 rows ahead raised her phone higher, whispering to her companion, "Why is he so calm? Doesn't he care?" Her friend shook his head. "Maybe he's guilty. Guilty people always go quiet." But the logic stumbled against the image before them, an older man sitting tall, shoulders square, eyes unwavering, no trace of panic. The senior attendant straightened, voice sharp, rehearsed. "Final warning. Vacate this seat or we will have you removed." Marcus didn't answer, didn't blink, didn't move. And in that stillness, the cabin began to shift. Passengers looked not just at him, but at one another. Unease spread. Doubt cracked the certainty of authority. Because silence, when wielded with dignity, has a way of making noise all its own. The hush in the cabin didn't last. It cracked, splintering under the sound of screens sliding open. Phones glowed like tiny spotlights, raised from armrests and tray tables, aimed directly at Marcus and the crew confronting him. In 5C, a college student with headphones hanging loose around his neck whispered to himself before pressing record. "This needs to be seen." The red dot blinked, alive, catching every insult, every silence. Across the aisle, a woman in her 30s angled her phone discreetly, lips pursed tight, muttering, "Unbelievable." Her seatmate leaned closer, whispering, "Careful, they'll tell you it's a violation to film." She shook her head. "And they'll say anything to bury this." 2 rows up, the teenage boy who had spoken earlier couldn't hold still. He turned in his seat, voice louder this time. "Why are you treating him like this?" He showed his ticket. Gasps followed. His mother yanked at his sleeve again, whispering, "Stop it, please." But her eyes, angry and wet, betrayed her. The senior attendant spun toward him, snapping, "Stay out of this." But the words rang too sharp, too defensive. They didn't silence the boy. They only sharpened the edges of doubt running through the cabin. Near the galley, the trainee with trembling hands glanced at her supervisor, then back at Marcus. Her stomach churned. She had scanned that ticket. She had watched the screen turn green. But rank chained her voice. So she did the only thing she could, slipped her phone deeper into her jacket pocket, audio recording still running. The soft red light glowed against the fabric like a secret conscience refusing to die. Whispers spread. Passengers exchanged fragments of sentences. "Looks wrong. He's not fighting back. They're pushing too hard." The air felt charged now, not with the hum of an aircraft, but with the hum of judgment shifting, leaning away from certainty, tipping toward Marcus. Still, the attendants doubled down. The younger one leaned against the seat back, sneering for anyone watching. "Y'all really think he paid for this? Please, he's playing you." The college student in 5C muttered back, "Or maybe you're playing us," his camera capturing the retort. Every second of silence from Marcus pulled the audience tighter. It was no longer a dispute about one seat. It was a stage, and everyone in first class was now part of the performance. The senior attendant straightened, her jaw stiff, trying to reclaim authority. "Phones down. Now, recording crew is prohibited." But not a single phone lowered. In fact, 3 more lifted higher. One man near the front said quietly but firmly, "If you can treat him like this, you can treat any of us like this. We're not putting our phones down." The balance had shifted. The passengers were no longer silent witnesses. They were chroniclers, guardians of memory, scribes with cameras instead of pens. And for Marcus, seated calm, hands resting loosely on his knees, the truth was already spreading. He didn't need to defend himself. The cabin was beginning to do it for him. The senior attendant's voice sharpened like a blade drawn too fast from its sheath. "Enough of this circus. Sir, you are not verified. You are trespassing in a premium cabin. Security will remove you before we depart." Her words ricocheted down the aisle. They weren't just orders. They were a verdict. Passengers stiffened in their seats, eyes darting between Marcus and the woman towering over him. The hum of the air vents suddenly sounded like static, charged and hostile. The younger attendant crossed his arms, smirking. "Let's not waste more time. People paid real money for this section. He can't even prove he belongs here." His voice carried smug confidence, but his eyes betrayed something else, an unease that flickered every time another phone camera tilted toward him. In 4B, the woman with the scarf couldn't stay silent anymore. She leaned forward, voice clear enough for nearby rows. You've asked for his ticket. He showed it. Why are you still pushing? The senior attendant snapped her head around, glare sharp enough to cut. Ma'am, stay seated. This doesn't concern you. But it did. It concerned everyone watching a man silently tried in the court of prejudice. The business traveler in 3C finally spoke up, though not to defend Marcus. Look, rules are rules. If staff say he's not supposed to be here, we should trust them. His words found a few nods, but they also drew side eyes. The division in the cabin widened, fault lines deepening with every sentence. Then came the final insult. The younger attendant leaned down, lowering his voice but letting the cabin hear every syllable. Come on, man, be real. You can't afford this seat. You're holding up actual clients. A murmur of outrage burst across row 5. The college student muttered into his phone, "Did he just say that out loud? On record?" Yes, he had. And the record was glowing red on half a dozen devices. Marcus stayed motionless, his silence more commanding than any protest could have been. His stillness said, "I will not play by your script. I will not rise to your bait." The senior attendant reached for the intercom near the galley. Her words cut through the entire cabin, broadcast across every row. Security to gate B14. We have a fraudulent passenger in first class, refusing to comply. The label landed heavy fraudulent passenger. Not man with a ticket. Not client in dispute. Fraudulent. A word meant to erase him, to paint him criminal in front of 100 strangers. Gasps rippled again. One passenger near the window shook his head and whispered, "This is wrong. So wrong." Another muttered, "She's escalating because she's losing." And yet, the attendant stood taller. Certain authority was theirs to wield. They didn't see it slipping. Didn't feel the current shifting toward Marcus's stillness, toward the passenger's unease, toward the quiet storm building in the cabin. The call for security had barely left the intercom when the younger attendant struck. He snatched the boarding pass from the armrest with a flick of his wrist. The paper crumpled under his grip, then tore clean down the middle with a sound that cut sharper than any insult. The rip echoed through the cabin. Every passenger heard it. Every phone recorded it. A single act of destruction, small in motion, massive in meaning. Gasps filled the air like turbulence. A woman in 2C clasped her hands to her mouth. The college student in 5C whispered into his recording, "They just destroyed his ticket. They actually destroyed it." His voice trembled, part disbelief, part fury. The attendant dropped the torn halves into the trash bag slung over his arm. "Problem solved," he muttered, dusting his hands as though erasing Marcus could be that easy. But the silence that followed wasn't agreement. It was horror. Horror at watching authority not enforce rules, but invent them. Marcus's eyes followed the torn slip of paper until it disappeared into the black plastic. He didn't lunge for it. He didn't shout. He sat straighter, as if the weight of injustice only anchored him deeper. The senior attendant, emboldened, stepped forward. "Sir, without a valid boarding pass, you are officially trespassing in this section. Security will remove you upon arrival." Her tone was cold, practiced, meant to sound official. But the cracks in her authority showed her voice carried too high, her words too desperate. A teenager in row 6 couldn't hold it in. "That's not right. You can't tear someone's ticket and then say it's invalid." Her father pulled her arm, whispering urgently, "Quiet." But the cabin had already heard, and phones had already captured it. The trainee near the galley flinched visibly. Her throat bobbed with words she couldn't swallow anymore. She had scanned that ticket. She had seen the system flash green. Her hand twitched toward her pocket where the recording still ran, red light pulsing like a heartbeat. The younger attendant sneered, "You people always try this. Fake passes, fake names, fake stories." His words dropped like stones into water, ripples of disgust spreading among passengers. "You people." 2 words too familiar, too loaded to disguise. The woman in 4B sat upright. "Did everyone hear that?" He just said it. Her voice rang clear, cutting the thin veil of procedure wide open. Heads turned. Phones angled closer. Marcus still hadn't spoken, but the cabin was no longer silent on his behalf. Voices rose, not many, not yet, but enough. Whispers turned into declarations, murmurs into challenges. And then, from the back of first class, a man in a gray blazer stood. He wasn't young, wasn't loud, but his words carried. "I saw the scan. His pass was valid. What you're doing is wrong." For the first time, the attendants faltered. Their certainty wavered under the weight of witnesses. Authority, once absolute, now looked fragile, shaking under the camera lenses. The gasps, the murmured dissent. But still, they pushed. "Security's on the way," the senior attendant snapped. And yet, as the cabin watched Marcus sit unmoving, hands folded calm, it was clear. Security wasn't just coming for him. It was coming for the truth. The torn boarding pass still rustled in the trash bag when Marcus finally moved. Not with anger, not with force, just a steady hand reaching into his pocket. The cabin held its breath as he lifted a phone, pressed a single button, and placed it to his ear. "Rachel," he said, his voice low but firm, carrying past row after row. "Activate Protocol 7. Log every word spoken since boarding. The board needs to see this." The cabin stirred. Passengers leaned closer, straining to hear. The attendants stiffened, glances darting between each other, uncertain now who exactly Marcus was talking to. On the other end, a woman's voice came crisp, efficient. "Understood, Mr. Jordan. Timestamp initiated. Audio feed live. Corporate is monitoring." The words weren't shouted, but they detonated like thunder in the silence. Phones caught every syllable. The lie of fraudulent passenger began unraveling in real time. The senior attendant's jaw tightened. "Sir, whoever you're calling, it won't change the fact you don't have a valid ticket." Her voice tried to sound certain, but the crack in it betrayed the first drip of fear. Marcus didn't look at her. He kept his gaze steady on the middle distance, as though seeing through the walls of the aircraft to the glass towers downtown where boardrooms waited. "Rachel, include the destruction of my boarding pass, verbatim threats, and the phrase, 'you people.' Make sure legal hears it." The younger attendant paled. His smirk vanished, replaced by the sudden awareness of phones tilted toward him, cameras catching every twitch. "I didn't mean," he stammered, but the words hung lifeless, too late, too recorded. Passengers shifted in their seats. What had begun as whispers now turned into open statements. "He's documenting everything. They tore his ticket. That's illegal. This isn't just bias, it's sabotage." The college student in 5C whispered into his mic, "This is history happening in row 2. His camera didn't waver. Rachel's voice came again, calm, clinical. "Board feed confirms escalation. Compliance team has entered review mode. Please advise next step." Marcus leaned back, folding his hands calmly in his lap. "No step yet. Let them speak. Let them bury themselves." The senior attendant tried to retake control, but the authority in her tone had thinned. "Security will decide your fate, not your phone call." Marcus finally lifted his eyes to meet hers. "No," he said quietly, every syllable deliberate. "Security enforces rules, but I write them." The cabin erupted in murmurs. A ripple of shock passed seat to seat. Phones caught it all, an older man, silent until now, dropping words heavy enough to shake the entire hierarchy standing above him. And for the first time since boarding, the attendants didn't have a ready reply. Their power was slipping, and Marcus had only just begun. The silence after his last words was heavier than the engines outside. Every row seemed to lean closer, waiting for the next move. Even the crew, once brimming with certainty, now looked cornered by their own arrogance. Marcus lifted the phone once more, his voice calm but resonant. "Rachel, confirm position." On speaker, her reply cut through the cabin like a verdict. "Confirmed, Mr. Jordan. You are seated 2 amperes, first class, Horizon Airlines flight, 623. Booking ID is verified under Marcus Jordan, CEO, Horizon Enterprises. 28% controlling stake. Status: active." Gasps rippled like a wave breaking against the fuselage. Several passengers sat back in stunned silence, eyes darting between Marcus's plain shirt and the revelation echoing through the cabin. The senior attendant's lips parted, but no words came. Her composure faltered for the first time, the mask of authority slipping. The younger attendant stammered, This has to be a mistake. He's just saying things." But Marcus didn't need to say anything else. The room had heard Rachel. The cameras had recorded, and the truth had detonated across the cabin. A man in row 3 whispered, "Wait, he owns the airline?" His seatmate nodded slowly, disbelief painted across her face. "That's what she said. He's the CEO." The woman with the scarf in 4B straightened her back, voice cutting through the stunned murmurs. "You called him a fraud in his own company." The weight of her words landed harder than any insult thrown at Marcus. Marcus finally rose from his seat. Slowly, calmly. His height filled the narrow aisle with more presence than volume ever could. "I didn't plan to speak today," he said evenly, his voice carrying without strain. "I wanted to see how my staff, my airline, My brand treated those who don't fit your picture of wealth. He let the words linger, each one striking like a gavel. And you failed. The senior attendant shook her head violently, grasping for control. This isn't fair. You set us up. Marcus's gaze didn't waver. No, he answered, voice low and sharp. I tested you, and you revealed yourselves. Phones captured every frame. The plain-dressed man standing tall, attendants shrinking under the truth. Passengers began clapping hesitant at first, then louder, until the sound filled the cabin like applause in a courtroom where justice had finally arrived. Marcus let the moment breathe, then added one final strike. You told me I didn't belong here, but the truth is, this cabin, this aircraft, this airline, it belongs to me. And every second you spoke, you weren't just humiliating a passenger. You were humiliating your employer. The clapping grew thunderous. The crew stood frozen, caught in the wreckage of their own prejudice. And Marcus, calm as ever, sat back down in seat 2, Ampere's his seat like a king, reclaiming a throne that was never in question. The revelation didn't just hang in the air, it detonated, scattering certainty into panic. The senior attendant's face drained of color. Her clipboard slipped from her hands, papers fluttering to the floor like surrender flags. She bent to retrieve them, but her fingers trembled too much to grip. The younger attendant took a stumbling step back, smirk long gone. His throat bobbed with words that refused to form. He glanced at Marcus, then at the rows of raised phones, the audience capturing his downfall. For the first time, he seemed small, his authority shrunken to nothing more than a name tag pinned to polyester. The trainee in the galley looked frozen, caught between fear of her superiors and the relief of vindication. Her eyes flicked to Marcus, then to the recording glowing in her pocket. The secret she carried no longer felt like a burden, it felt like armor. And the passengers? They erupted. Applause cracked like thunder down the aisle, echoing off the cabin walls. Some clapped slow, deliberate, punctuating the humiliation of the crew. Others clapped fast, furious, their relief spilling out like years of bottled outrage. Unbelievable, a woman muttered, shaking her head as her phone captured it all. They tried to erase him in his own company. From the back, the teenage boy stood halfway, hands cupped to his mouth. "Justice! That's justice!" he shouted, his voice breaking but strong enough to draw more cheers. His mother didn't pull him down this time. Instead, she clapped too. The business traveler in 3C, who had defended the crew minutes earlier, now shifted uncomfortably. His tie looked tighter, his certainty choking him. Guess I was wrong, he admitted to no one in particular. His words were caught by a nearby phone, broadcast into a digital chorus of accountability. The senior attendant attempted one last stand. "This doesn't change procedure," she stammered, her voice cracking. "Respect for staff." But her words were drowned by the applause, by the murmurs of passengers siding with Marcus, by the undeniable reality that she no longer held authority. The younger attendant whispered urgently, almost pleading, We didn't know who you were." Marcus didn't even look at him. He didn't need to. Because ignorance wasn't a defense, it was the very charge. Camera zoomed closer. Passengers leaned into the aisle for better views. The humiliation of the crew wasn't hidden. It was magnified, framed, broadcast, archived forever. And through it all, Marcus sat in 2 Amperes, unmoved, his calm demeanor now transformed into something more an anchor around which the cabin revolved. He didn't need to shout for justice. Justice had turned its lens, its ears, its applause directly onto him. For the crew, the collapse was complete. For the passengers, the alignment was clear. And for Marcus, the stage was finally set for what came next. The applause hadn't even faded when Marcus lifted his phone once more. Calm, deliberate. "Rachel," he said, his voice steady as iron. "Execute termination protocol. Effective immediately remove this crew from Horizon Airline systems." The cabin hushed, the sound of justice about to land louder than any cheer. On speaker, Rachel's reply rang clear and sharp. "Confirmed. Processing now. Access credentials revoked. Employee IDs locked." A beat later, the evidence appeared. The senior attendant's badge, clipped neatly at her chest, blinked red. The younger attendant's tablet froze, screen flashing access denied. Even the intercom button at the galley lit once, then went dead. Gasps surged through the rows. Passengers craned for a better look. A woman whispered, "He just shut them down. Right here, live." Another muttered, "I've never seen power move that fast." The senior attendant clutched her useless badge. pressing it again and again against the reader at the galley wall. Each time, the same cold denial, unauthorized. Her breath hitched, eyes wide with the sudden collapse of everything she thought untouchable. The younger attendant nearly dropped his device. He tried to laugh it off, but the sound cracked halfway. "Glitch," he muttered. "System glitch." But his pale face betrayed him, and the rows of raised phones told him the truth. Nobody believed it. The trainee near the galley watched, stunned. Her pocket still hummed with the red glow of her recording, but now it felt unnecessary. The system itself had spoken. The company had spoken. Justice had spoken. Passengers erupted again, but this time it wasn't applause alone. It was laughter, cheers, vindication. Some clapped. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Others called out words sharp as knives. "Serves you right. You tore his ticket now, look at yours." The senior attendant's knees buckled slightly. She gripped the seat back for balance, lips trembling as if to form an apology, but none came, because no apology could erase what had already been etched into dozens of recordings, into the memory of every soul on board. Marcus didn't gloat, didn't smirk. He simply sat back, phone still in hand, posture calm. The storm was not his to rage in, it was his to end. Rachel's voice returned, final and absolute. "Termination complete. Legal notified. Incident logged for audit." The younger attendant sank into the jump seat, head in hands. The senior attendant stared blankly at her dead badge. And around them, passengers clapped again, not for cruelty, but for balance restored. Marcus exhaled, slow and steady. Not relief. Resolution. The fight was over. And the verdict was irreversible. The cabin was still vibrating with murmurs when Marcus rose once more. He didn't rush. Didn't need to. Every eye, every camera, every breath was already fixed on him. He stood in the narrow aisle like it was a courtroom floor. The passengers, his jury, the disgraced crew, his defendants. Silence stretched, not empty, but electric, waiting for the gavel to fall. Marcus scanned the rows, his gaze measured, heavy, deliberate. Finally, he spoke. "Dignity," he began, his voice calm, even, yet carrying to the very back of the plane, "is not a privilege. It's not an upgrade you buy. It's the boarding pass every human being already carries." The words landed like anchors, pulling the cabin deeper into his gravity. "Tonight," he continued, "you watched dignity torn in half, just like that ticket. But let me be clear, paper can be destroyed, systems can be manipulated. But dignity, that belongs to the person who holds it, and no one, not even those in uniform, has the right to take it." Passengers nodded, some clapping softly, others whispering affirmations to the strangers beside them. Marcus glanced at the discarded badge, still blinking red on the senior attendant's chest. "You thought silence meant weakness, that my calm meant you were winning. But silence," he paused, the weight of the moment sharp as steel, "is strategy, and tonight, it ended you." Phones captured the line instantly. It would live far beyond this flight, on timelines, in headlines, in the minds of every witness. He turned slightly, addressing not just the crew, but the entire cabin. "I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to fight you, because the truth doesn't need volume, it needs time, and time always reveals who really belongs." A ripple of applause grew into a wave, rolling from the back to the front of first class. Even those who had doubted him earlier clapped now, their faces lit with the recognition of justice done in real time. Marcus let the sound wash over him, but didn't bask in it. He wasn't here for applause. He was here for a principle. As the cheers quieted, he delivered the final strike. "I don't need your cameras to prove what happened here tonight. I don't need your sympathy either, because I am not the victim of this story. I am the result of it." The cabin erupted one last time, applause, whistles, the pounding rhythm of hands against hands in the tight space of first class. The sound wasn't just approval. It was release, vindication. Marcus returned to seat 2 amperes, lowered himself calmly, and fastened his belt. The applause still roared around him, but he sat like stone, unmoved, unshaken, a man who had reclaimed what was his without ever raising his voice. And in that moment, the lesson was carved into the memory of every witness. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply sits down and refuses to move.